Hey, everybody, look. It says Enrich, or something like that. That's supposed to be enrich. Yeah, that's the right note you want to start on, isn't it? Okay, so I'm currently recording this on Monday night, preceding, let's see, it will be April the 4th. I'm recording this now because it's kind of up in the air as to whether or not the introduction of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World will be coming out in time. Mostly because John is a little sick right now. It's very hard for him to record right now, and I get all of John's stuff done very last minute, which is maybe not the best way to go about processes, but I'm just doing what I gotta do because he's busy, and I understand that, and I'll get into that as this commentary goes on. But I figured I should probably give you guys something for taking another week off, because I just took a month off to try and get Volume 2 ready, and it's still not, so I'm going to be doing plenty of stuff on that. Okay, now that we're about a minute or so in, more than that, honestly, this is the director, MJTR. My first name is Michael, the rest are just fine staying as initials. And I'm the director of Scott Pilgrim, the audiobook. And I feel like I want to address a lot of things, and I'm currently voicing this over the introduction, of course, and there'll be some comments I have to say about the videos themselves and about what's really going on between them all, but I'm going to kind of go in broad strokes for just at least here at the start, so I'm not super listening in to what's going on in the videos at the current moment. But I'll get to those. I'll get to how casting choices came about and a lot of that other stuff. With that said, let's start with kind of the most basic question I'm sure plenty of people had. Why would you want to do a Scott Pilgrim audiobook? There's a few reasons, I find. My girlfriend and I disagree on exactly when I got the idea to do this. She says I decided I was going to do it back in like November of 2011. And I say I was going to do it sometime around February of 2012. And there's sketchy stuff both ways. The simple fact is I think she remembers it one way, I remember it another. I really don't know what's the truth, so... But nonetheless, so why would one want to do a Scott Pilgrim audiobook? Well, I am a huge fan of the comic books. That's kind of your basic start. I'm sitting in my college dorm room. I have all 6 of the original black and white prints up on my shelf. I have the DVD of the movie on my shelf, and I have the 2 current color prints of the first 2 volumes that exist. I don't own the evil editions, admittedly, but, you know, I'm still doing pretty well in terms of Scott Pilgrim collectibles at this point in time, and we just went through the entire introduction, so that's that. And there's nothing to comment on.
Dating
Not,
a high
not
schooler?
at this moment. I more want to get exactly at kind of the nuts and bolts of why I decided to do this. So part of it was that a lot of people's experience with Scott Pilgrim was from the movie a few years ago, which is kind of shocking because I know the movie didn't make that much money. But and the movie's good. I don't want to discredit the movie. Everybody turns in a pretty solid performance. It is, for the most part, pretty true to the books. But as with anything, you lose a lot in translation, and a part of me just wanted to really get the books word for word, detail for detail, and so that's ultimately what I set out to do. Set out to perfectly emulate the mood, the humor, the awesome fight scenes, and all of that stuff. Ooh, sorry about that. From the original books, and put it in an audiobook format, and a very cinematic audiobook. I've listened to some audiobooks while I've been in the process of this, and I find it is like listening to different people read out loud.
Come on.
But I went for a more
Nice to
cinematic
meet you.
approach. There's a lot more music than you see in a lot of
You may have been kidding.
standard
Are you
audiobooks out
normally
there, and I'm
bad?
sure there's a good reason for that, and I'm sure I'm doing this very differently from what most people would do, and maybe maybe a company who makes audiobooks would not recommend I do things in this way, but it's the way I've chosen to do them because I feel like it best captures what's going on. So there's one reason for making a Scott Pilgrim audiobook: total utter fanboyism, which I'll get more into as I talk about some of the cast. The other major reason. I'll get to the major reason. One of the other reasons was I always wanted to do something with voice acting. I always wanted to put my voice towards something or have some full voice stuff. I was fierce when I was a kid back in 7th grade. You know, this was before YouTube, so if you wanted to watch animation and stuff like that, you went to Newgrounds, and I still like a lot of what goes on in Newgrounds. Even to this day, I know Flash animation is really starting to die, but I still really like what goes on with Flash animation. I still think it's all a lot of really cool stuff. And I was always a fan of that and always wanted to do something with that, but never was capable. And so I went on and off about various like radio plays and ideas like those. And, you know, just after a long hiatus from voice acting or doing anything related to it, I finally got back on the voice acting club forums and was like, I'm gonna put together a Scott Pilgrim audiobook. It's gonna be gigantic. Everybody's gonna have like a ton of lines, and I need a huge cast for this. And voice acting club forum being the amazing place that it is, I got most of what I needed very quickly. So that's the other thing, that I always wanted to do something like this, but I've never really been sure quite how. So yeah, here I am now, and how. Running audio commentary, no less, which is something else that's pretty cool. And the other major thing that happened was my girlfriend, who I mentioned previously. We've been going out for 3.5 years, and we just had broken up like a month before this, and we've gotten back together since. But we were split up for about a good 6 months, and I was in a really bad place, a really miserable place, and I just wasn't doing anything with my time. I was just kind of laying around and slouching when I wasn't going to my classes. I'm in college and everything, so I go to class and all of that. I was just, you know, just this really miserable mess.
She's 17.
And then
How
one
did you
day
know?
I just decided, you know what?
Gossipy
I want
bitch.
to do something. I want something to take up some more of my time. So I decided to compose an audiobook that's about, you know, that's about the strange nature of love and relationships and all those things that maybe I shouldn't have exactly been thinking about as much as I was at the time. So that's that, and you know, we mended our relationship a few months later, just before my birthday, no less. So that was really cool. And now she's the voice of, oddly enough, Stacy Pilgrim. You can hear in the background. So me and Edgar Wright have that in common. The actresses we have play Stacy, we also end up dating. That's that's a fun little coincidence right there. And I've not been taking this scene by scene at all, of course, so I'll talk more about this scene by scene, and character by character. The first thing that, now that we've established why I would want to do a Scott Pilgrim audiobook, I'll talk about the cast a little bit, because the cast is, of course, the most important part of this entire thing. So, of the cast, probably the biggest thing, the two people who have kind of the biggest reputations by far, are Proton John and Man Without a Body. And in getting, there's probably, there can be some questions about exactly how does one get their hands on Man Without a Body and Proton John. I don't know, maybe there is, maybe there isn't, maybe people just figure this is not a particularly difficult process, but I thought it was going to be hell. And so when I first started this project, I should probably mention there was no narrator, so there wasn't a role that Man Without a Body was going to fill. And it's funny the exact nature of Scott's role,
Hey, what's
because the
up?
thing
This
is,
my cool gay roommate,
the
Walt
first
Wells.
guy who turned in a performance for Scott was a voice actor named Sonic Mega, who I actually now recognize from a few other things he was in.
You go now.
He was
You
in
leave.
Pokemon
Gone.
P-Red, which is an awesome Flash movie that anyone who's ever had any nostalgia over Pokemon should probably watch.
You're too good.
And he turned in this really killer performance for Scott, and he said just like, I own the
Yeah,
books, you
fine.
don't need to send me a script, this'd be really cool. And I was just like, oh, this could not have gone any better. So that was really cool.
But I thought Derek and Tamara had a mutual.
And then a
friend
few
in each
weeks
other.
later, he tells me that it would be too time consuming for him to take the role, and he needed to drop it. So I was like, crap!
What? He's
I'm
shy?
out this really great
Your friend's
voice
cracking
actor
me up.
for
Wanna
Scott.
go to Goodwill?
So I kept the project up, kept recording with all the rest of the cast for a few months, and then I found Phil Sturman, who is another really cool voice actor. And I should probably bring up the original prerequisite for Scott's voice actor was they needed to be able to pull a fairly decent Edward Elric impression, because
It's not really my.
I
band,
kind of
it's
wanted my
mostly
Scott to
Steven
sound like
Stills.
Edward Elric, and that was only at the time, because to be
Steven
entirely
Stills?
honest about
Yeah.
this entire thing, Proton John
Well,
was
thanks.
always my dream role for Scott, but I always thought, no way I should even bother asking him, because he's busy, he's got all kinds of stuff, he's got 100,000 subscribers, man. You need, don't bother with him, because, you know, you will never be able to get your hands on
Spring's
someone
around the
like
corner.
him.
Try it on.
So I didn't. And I spent a few months without a good Scott, because Phil was very busy. I understand that wholeheartedly. And I was talking with Brian, who's the guy who plays Steven, because me and the cast, we chat over Skype, sometimes about nothing at all. And I told him, like, I still don't have a Scott, I don't know what to do. And he's like, you know, he was still confident that I'd figure something out. And I said, you know what? I'm going to send a private message to Proton John on YouTube.
Okay,
And I
it's my
didn't
old
even know
house.
if he'd
It's where I
know
lived
who
when
I
I was
was
in high
talking about, but he did, and he was like, awesome.
No,
And so I sent
they
the
left.
message.
They sold it.
1 hour later, John gets back to me, and he's like, this sounds cool.
So
This
yeah,
sounds like
this is
something
where
to be
it all
kind of
happened.
fun. I'm a Scott Pilgrim fan. I relate to the story.
I'll
So
back to
sure,
Boston,
why
okay?
not? And I messaged Brian back, and I was like, holy crap, man, you're never gonna believe this. I couldn't believe it. I was blown off my rocker, because this was someone I really liked. I've been a fan of Proton John for a few years now.
I'm dreaming?
I did,
We make
my
out then?
cousin was over at my house, and we were watching clips from, you know, the best worst movies ever. We were repeatedly watching clips. We were repeatedly watching the Garbage Day clip from Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, the Oh My God clip from Troll 2. And then at one point we were looking up, so what else do we watch? And he just pulled up the Super Kaza World episode 2, and we just sat there at John screaming, you know, move faster, Pokey, and all that stuff from that episode that he is now trying to get away from because he's done doing ROM hacks. But nonetheless, I became a huge Proton John fan that day. I followed a lot of what he's done ever since. I had written a few other projects over the years before I realized how hard it is to get some of these people's attention. I'd written a few other projects over the years that could potentially have like Proton John in a cameo. There was at one point a
No,
Final
you go
Fantasy
ahead.
III parody in which
Or am I just
there's a scene, if you know Final Fantasy III,
No,
in
Wallace.
which
I
the
insist.
final boss, the Cloud of Darkness, kills the entire
You deserve
cast
that
in
more
one
than I
hit.
do, Other Scott.
And I just wanted to zoom out, and then there's Proton John playing on a
Well,
DS.
thanks for lunch, Wallace.
And he's screaming and
problem,
swearing,
guy.
and he breaks the thing because he doesn't realize it
Man,
was a
I just
scripted
remembered.
battle.
I totally had this weird dream.
And so I always kind of wanted to work
Can we
with him
skip the
because,
dream time?
again,
Clearly
he's
not interested.
he's kind of someone I've always really looked up to in terms of internet comedy. And you know, he's just been really cool about the entire process. He's busy, so it's hard to get to record with him, but when I do, it's really friggin' cool, and I do my best to be on my best behavior, I suppose, because like I don't, and he's very down to earth. I don't need to freak out as much as I do, but it's just really cool to be chatting
Just sign
and
it.
working with
Right.
someone
Yeah.
who
there.
I do have such a
Thanks.
whose sense of humor I've had such a
You know
fondness
that
for,
girl?
and who's kind of had an
No.
influence on my own
No,
brand of
wait,
personal,
think
out
so?
loud, shouty,
Isn't it
mean
too snowy
humor.
outside for
Not mean. He's
rollerblading?
never mean. John's never mean, but that's that. And so that's the story with John.
Scott,
Man Without a Body. I
only played
I
one
contacted
note
him
for that
shortly
entire
after
song.
John because I was really
Was,
excited that I just gotten
that
John.
hand slips?
So I decided to contact him,
Is
and he was
your
like, "It sounds
girlfriend
really
distracting
interesting.
you?
Are you know, is this all in legal place?"
Let's do that one again.
It kind of is, I
Awful.
suppose. We're not making any money, and we're not showing the pictures, so I am pretty sure this is all excusable. I certainly hope so, but if I got a cease and desist order from O'Malley's lawyer, I'll admit that'd be kind of cool. And particularly if he sent me a cease and desist in the mail, because then I might get his signature.
dreaming.
And that'd be really awesome. And I got totally off subject. Man Without a Body, when I contacted him, was just like, yes, this sounds like fun. Let me know what we should do. So I got a hold of him shortly thereafter, and we chatted about
Whatever.
all kinds of
It's
things.
like
The
spring
aborted
out.
script of Gladiator 2.
Going.
Find the aborted
Told
script
you
of
like 50
Gladiator 2.
times.
Good lord.
God, okay?
I mean,
Like,
totally
it's my
unrelated to
fault you're
Scott
stupid.
Pilgrim, but find the unfinished script of Gladiator
Where-
2.
I'm seriously not even
But,
telling you now.
We're going
And we
to
just
that
chatted and
party,
finally
retard.
recorded, and I just
Julie's.
did want him to
man.
do that thing he's always doing, where he's just like, you know,
Man, that
Dobby
fucking
relish
sucks.
his groinsols, roar as it are." And I got into Man Without a Body from a TV Tropes link when I
So
happened
party,
to
eh?
discover
Thought
30
Skills and Julie
H's,
broke up.
which
Hey, listen, come
is the
You know everyone,
greatest
right?
piece of
Well,
fiction that
I
no
wouldn't
one has
say
ever had to pay
everyone.
for. I mean, good
yeah,
lord.
I guess.
I am a huge Scott Pilgrim
Okay,
fan, but
this
30
might sound
H's,
vague,
man.
but do you know this one
30
girl with hair
H's
like
is
this?
amazing.
You mean Ramona?
I
And
don't
so,
know, maybe.
you know, fairly straightforward
Yeah, man,
conversations with
Ramona
John
Flowers.
and
Someone said she was
I had Man Without a Body.
actually. You should look
I'm
around.
sorry, I'm distracted
You
because
got
I'm
the
hearing
hots for her?
myself voice
I hear
Como
she's
at the moment.
hardcore.
I'm sure I wanted someone
Wait
else
up,
to voice
she's
him.
here? Dude, I gotta go
And
look for
I
her.
fill in the roles that I don't really have anyone else instantly available to fill in for. So, throughout Volume 1, I play Como, I play several members of Crash and the Boys, and I play Knives Chow's mom in what my brother said was one of his favorite things he's seen on the internet. It's just me, incredibly white German boy, descended from Germany. I live in Iowa, and my family has lived in Iowa for over a century, but nonetheless, that I was, you know, Sherman, nice boy, you like him, which I'm sure I may or may, I'm pretty positive I'll be going to hell for doing, but nonetheless, where else was I gonna get someone to play that role? I don't, unfortunately, know any, you know, crabby adult Asian women. Unfortunately. So, kind of speaking about Knives Chow, she was kind of what I was going to move on to next. When I first was preparing this project, the original plan was get as many people off of the internet as possible, and just kind of involve personal friends a little less, so I don't have to
I like your shoes.
teach them about voice acting, I guess. But even from the first moment, I really knew I had a friend in high school. Her name was Michelle Tran. She's in all of the credits, of course. She was this very Knives Chow-like girl in some ways. She was the very excitable, good-spirited Asian girl stereotype, I suppose.
Dude, I'm totally
And
dreaming.
so we didn't hang out
What?
a whole ton, but we were around each other during plays and stuff because we took the same theater class. And she just had this
Okay.
wonderful, wonderful energy to her. And so in the middle of the process, as I'm still getting voice actors and all of that, I eventually messaged her. And I was like, Michelle, we haven't been in communication since I left high school, I know, but I'm doing this audiobook project right now. And I was wondering if you might like the chance to be introduced to some voice acting. And her response was very instantaneous. Yeah, this sounds like a lot of fun. So I went back to my old high school, which is in town. It wasn't a long trip, and we would hang out and we would record during the periods that she wasn't working. So like during her study hall or release times, we would just hang out in little choir rooms, talk about the comics, and I would have her record stuff for Knives, and she was a wonderful pick for it. She did a really, really great job. I'm so happy to have had her on board with this project. She was a ton of fun, and as long as we're in communication, I'm gonna keep cracking jokes about this to her, because this is a really, she has said herself that this was a really awesome thing, and she's very glad she worked with me on it. I was very happy to have her. She's a very fun, very energetic Knives Chow. I'm very happy to have her on board. While we're talking about my personal friends who are involved in the project, Wallace Wells is voiced by Aaron Homard, who is another friend of mine from high school. He's actually in my grade, and I'm not entirely sure what he's doing right now, but the short end of the short story is I had to get him when I got him, because he now lives out of state. He's doing something really awesome, and something, you know, related to acting. I think he might be involved in an independent film somehow. I think I heard he got like a contract after doing some stand-up. So like, he did some really amazing stuff, and I was very happy to have him. He was a great actor in high school. He played some great roles. And it's funny, because when I first wanted to approach him about the role, it was towards the beginning of the school year. Not the beginning of the school year, rather the beginning of the winter semester. And I messaged him, and I was like, Aaron, I've always thought you had a cool voice. I'm thinking about doing this project that involves voice acting. Would you be interested in doing it? And he's like, during the school year, I don't think so. And he lived out of state, and I wanted to just Skype with him or whatever, but he just said, no, I don't think that would work out very well. Now, if you're still doing this during the summer, I'd be glad to participate. And I'm not going to talk about the extreme development process this entire thing has been through. That's for another commentary, but we finally got to work together. We did the whole thing in one day over the course of several hours. Aaron is a really great actor. I really like his voice. He was channeling a lot of John Benjamin, which is what I always thought Wallace should sound like. So he's not doing a John Benjamin impersonation per se, but he is channeling a lot of John Benny, and John Benjamin is one of Aaron and my favorite actors, so that all worked out really cool, really cool. While we're still kind of early in the process, talking about, now, let's see, who to go to next. I guess since we're still talking about Scott's inner circle pre-Ramona, because I'll talk about Ramona. As mentioned before, Stacy, Scott's sister, is played by my girlfriend, Meredith Phipps, who is an actress herself. She's always been really great with it. She's always had a lot of fun with it. And I think she's had a lot of fun in this role. She likes that, she and that chick, I think her name is Ashlyn Green, are now sharing a role, which is...
You've got mail.
And I have a cousin who plays Lucas Lee, and I'll get into that in Volume 2, but my cousin who plays Lucas Lee is also a gigantic Captain America fan, and I just... At one point in the development process, I was just like, Jake, you gotta step up your game. Let me put this into perspective for you. If you do this role, you and the guy who played Captain America will have voiced the same person. And he was just on it from there. And Meredith and the Stacy role are much the same as well. Meredith has complained to me that she thinks the Stacy character is too masculine looking, and in a lot of the panels I'm kind of inclined to agree. But I just, like, my only argument for that situation is, well, she's based off Brian Lee O'Malley's sister. I really don't think Brian Lee O'Malley wanted to make his sister super tantalizing looking. That's my argument to that. And she's been fun to work with. It's been good to work alongside her. I've worked alongside of her on a few acting projects. This is the first one where I've been in charge. So, yeah, she's been really, really cool to work with. Moving on a little bit to the people who come from the online, because I really do want to give some amazing props to these people from the Voice Acting Club forums. They are composed of, in this book, Jim Knickerbocker, who is the voice of young Neil, Brian Croft, who is the voice of Stephen Stills, and Lindsay, who does the voice of Kim. And all three of those guys, we have chatted over Skype for I don't know how long over various things. And they're all really cool people, and they were all really excited to work with this. And they all had varying levels of experience, because Brian has all of the books, and he really knew how to do a good, gruff Stephen. And Lindsay's only ever seen the movie, so we've been slowly introducing her to the world of the comic, and she does a lot of cool stuff. It's impressive what you can do with a monotone, grumpy voice, because Lindsay does that, and she's very capable of doing that, and I really, really like what she does. And Jim, of course, Jim's voice is not like young Neil's. Jim has a fairly normal voice, but he can hit those higher pitches. And it's probably not right to characterize Neil like that, because Neil's 19 years old. I mean, he should have... I'm 19 years old. He should have a voice like mine. But when you name your character Young Neil, the temptation is just there to do it like that. And so the simple fact is, being in communication with these guys for so long, they have become really good friends of mine. At least in an internet, I want to chat with you on Skype sense. Maybe more than that. They are, I think of them all now as just good chatting online friends. They're all wonderful, wonderful people. And it's been really great to work with all of them. And it's really good to know that such a cool group of people make up Scott's posse. As it were. I'll talk about Ramona last, I suppose, since I've kind of built everything else up around this. The various side characters who show up at the party Scott and Ramona meet at are all played by just people who happen to constantly be around my house. Because I have 6 siblings, and most of them have boyfriends and girlfriends, or husbands and wives. So actually, at the scene where Scott's talking to Sandra and Monique, Sandra and Monique are played by 2 of my older brother's girlfriends. And then Julie is played by my sister, who is an actress but hasn't gotten to do anything with for a long time, and so she thought it was cool to get to play somebody again. She doesn't agree with me on how mean we wanted to make the character. Because she sympathizes with Julie a lot. She can tell from one page that Scott's a friggin' idiot, and he is. But whereas Scott becomes more tolerable as the series goes, Julie becomes exponentially more annoying. Then that does not reflect on my sister as a person. That reflects on my sister as an actor. Or actress, rather. And she's a wonderful actress, and she handles that really well. And I got the idea of casting her when we were on a family trip not terribly long ago, and she gave me some much-deserved crap, and I was like, oh, well, she knows how to give someone some much-deserved crap. Now, Domino is the voice of Matthew Patel in this, in Volume 1. And he was like, I think the first person to send any audition material into me. And he was just really cool about it. He was really excited. And he was really excited about doing the whole Bollywood song. Which actually, you know, I haven't really gotten any comments on it. But, like, from viewership and from, like, you know, thumbs up, people seem to like. And I was nervous as heck about that. I'll talk about that in the scene-by-scene commentary. But, man, I was freaking out about that night before. And I'll get into that. But geez. But Domino did a really good job. He did a really good job with the singing and the dancing motion and being all, I delivered that letter to you personally in the middle of a blizzard. And he was just a lot of fun to work with, to talk to.
Am I coming off as rude or something
and
like that?
So that's
remember
most
me,
of
do
the
you?
cast,
We,
sans
met
Ramona.
at
I'm
that
going to
party
talk about
today.
Ramona
More
in a
flowers,
sec.
right?
That have been present
Oh
in Volume
my
1. There are
God.
so many other people
You
who I
asked me
owe this
about-
project to.
I just thought you
There
were
are so many
crazy.
other just
I'm
wonderful
so
people
sorry.
I got to work with
No, it's
in this
cool,
project,
that's
and I'll
okay.
talk about them as we go.
You really have to
There's
sign for this, though.
Allie, who
If I
is the
sign for
really
it,
friggin' awesome voice
Yeah.
of Lisa Miller.
Well, yeah.
There are
I
various
have a job,
relatives and
see?
close friends
I'm
of
on the
mine who
clock.
play different members of the League of Evil
Can we
X's.
go out sometime?
I
Or,
am
mean,
hopeful
mean,
that the
can we
voices we
just hang
continue to
out?
hear
Can we get to know each
just
other?
kind of pull
You're
us
new
in
town, right?
farther and
I've
farther,
lived here
because
forever.
I feel like
mean,
I feel
there
like I could not have
are
gotten
reasons
much more
for
of
you
a
to hang out
dream
with me.
cast together for this. The
Oh,
only
that's-
people, the
I'm so
only roles in this
sincere.
entire
Sincerely
thing
lame.
who I don't feel are nailed
Your thingy goes
entirely
through my
are the
head,
voices that
You
I
were
have to
literally
supplement.
through my head on your way to deliver stuff,
And
so that's why I'm obsessed.
I feel like everybody else just
Wait.
nailed it. I
Let's
feel like
pretend
everyone
didn't
else has
say obsessed.
always just put this
You're
series
totally
out of the
obsessed with
park.
you. I need
You know,
to
in
find
terms
you.
of what it is, I feel
Either
like
that or you need to
I
start hanging
feel
out.
like with a
You
cast
want
like
me
this,
to hang out.
this almost
you.
ascends what it is, and that's a
That's
shoddy,
cool.
amateurish, audiobook presentation,
How about
as
tonight?
it were.
Is
But
tonight
I
okay
feel
with you?
like
Can
maybe
you
if
please sign this and take
if
your
this
stupid
this
CV?
is the cast of
Yes,
people
certainly, Ramona
I would put
Flowers.
together and recommend to someone who can
So, yeah,
direct and
8
edit
o'clock?
better than I can. But because I'm the guy you got, this is what I managed to do with them. So
Why are you just
that's the
standing?
cast, and now I'll talk on
Dude,
Ramona, just
I'm
because I
waiting on
saved her
you.
for last, because I wanted to talk about a
It's
different
getting nice
character
out, eh?
last.
I can really
Ramona
dig the
is voiced by Taylor
What's with
Atchison,
the
who has
X,
been a friend of
anyway?
mine since the 5th grade, so
On
we
your
go back
coat?
quite a while.
part. Oh, this.
And Taylor was
Well,
a Scott Pilgrim
obviously,
fan.
one of us
She
went to
really
Professor
liked the
Xavier's school
character
for
of
gifted
Ramona.
dumpsters, and one of us did.
And Taylor's
Obviously,
always
Wes is a total nerd.
Taylor's just
Did you
always
patch
been a
yourself?
very good friend,
don't have
someone
an answer
very
for that.
reliable. And so when I was putting this thing together, and I've been going at it for a long time, still no good voice of
So,
Ramona.
how'd you end up in
I went for
Toronto?
a friend or two of my
Well,
own, and then I just
I
decided
got
I'll,
this
I'll
job
ask
at
Taylor because I haven't
Amazon,
talked to her
and they needed
lately.
someone here,
So I talked to
and,
Taylor, and she was
he
really
said
cool
Toronto's
about it
one
and
of the
really
great cities,
excited
so
about it.
Who's Gideon?
And
Boyfriend?
ultimately,
he's-
that's what gave us the voice of Ramona
He's
that
a
we
friend.
have. And maybe some
Anyway,
people
what
would
do you
disagree
do?
with me
I'm
on
a
how
food
Ramona
truck.
Flowers would sound.
Between
Plenty of
what
people have
and what?
disagreed with me about how Wallace Wells should sound. Some people have told me maybe you don't want to go with the completely over the top,
I don't even wanna talk about it.
insane narrator.
Maybe volume 3
But
now.
these are the people I wanted for these roles, and I feel like they
Subspace
fulfilled
highways. Whatever, man.
everything I
It was
wanted
totally
of
an
them.
accident.
And
I
if they're,
didn't mean to get
I
you
can
upset.
only be disappointed
It's-
with myself
Haven't
throughout
obsessed in
this.
so
Is I
long.
think the major
Really
point I
weird.
want to get at,
Well,
because
you sleep with
at
a
the end
guy,
of the
right?
day, I feel like I was given a lot of
I was just
amazing
guessing from
material to
having seen
work
your
with.
apartment,
I
but
owe
you
all
totally
of this
do.
voice cast so much.
It's-
You guys have been
What's this
so
for?
awesome to
We
work
can't
with,
afford 2
and
beds.
I look forward to getting the further
We're
volumes
not
out,
gay.
so that
What?
the
No, Wallace
general
is pretty
audience
gay,
out
but,
there,
Dude,
all
relax,
10 of
man.
them,
I
all 10 of
believe
you guys, can continue to enjoy just this wonderful thing we've been putting together. And that's about it for this general commentary. I'm going to switch gears at this point. I'm going to talk about the individual chapters, so you can
Aw, you're
tune in for
probably
that.
not